Hi, everyone. Okay, here we go with fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism is simply looking at the relationship between the national government and the state and local governments that grows out of grants of money that the national government provides for them. So a definition, grants of money the national government provides to the states. Federal money is a powerful source of influence over the states. Now, there is a main way this is done, the most common type being called grants in aid. And grants in aid have two categories, categorical grants and block grants. Historically, the most common type of grant has been a categorical grants, and those are for a specific purpose. There are two types of categorical grants, project grants, and those are most common form that are awarded based on competitive application. And then formula grants, which are distributed according to a formula. For example, more welfare money would go to a state that has a population that is below poverty level. More people in that category. It's also, you could even consider it aid for families that have dependent children. States that have more families with dependent children might have more Medicaid funds given to that state. The other type of grants are block grants. These are the happy face grants, the kinds the states like, because there are fewer requirements or regulations attached to these grants. Whereas a categorical grant might say this money is for teacher salaries, a block grant might say this money is for education, and the states get to decide how to use it. Now let's talk about the word mandate. A mandate is a requirement. It's something that the states must do. There are funded mandates and unfunded mandates. Unfunded mandates are not making the states happy. As a result, the states have to pay for whatever program it is the government wants them to implement. But no matter what, the states are required to comply with whatever it is the government wants them to do. An unfunded mandate, the states are required to meet particular goals, costing the states money, but no funds provided by the federal government. Two acts I want you to know about. The Americans with Disabilities Act. This was an unfunded mandate, and it said that it prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in employment, transportation, public accommodation, communications, and governmental activities. So looking at the part about public accommodation, that's talking about getting the handicap parking spaces, wheelchair ramps, accessible restrooms, elevators, that type of thing in public places, as well as certainly discriminating against people with disabilities in employment. And if a person couldn't get to their job, and that was the main reason that they couldn't be hired, that would be a problem. The other act is the Welfare Reform Act of 1996, where states are given the power and money to run their own welfare programs. This is an example of devolution. The states are given discretion on how to implement the federal goal of moving people from welfare to work. The federal government still gives the states money. It's just that the states are implementing these programs now. That's it. Thanks for listening. Okay, gang, we're going to talk about fiscal federalism. And fiscal federalism means grant money provided by the national government to the states. It's a very powerful source of influence that the federal government has over the states. The main type of fiscal federalism we're going to look at is called grants in aid. And this is used by the federal government to influence and help the states. Two types, categorical grants and block grants. Categorical grants are designed for a specific purpose, and project grants are one example of those, awarded most often based on competitive applications, and then formula grants distributed according to a formula. That could be the number of people living at poverty level or below in a state. They might get more money because of that. Another type of grants in aid would be block grants. There are a few strings attached to these. The states like these. The example would be a categorical grant might be funding for teacher salaries, whereas block grants might just be funding for education. So the states have more leeway in how they apply that money, how they spend that money. Now we're going to talk about mandates. A mandate is a requirement, something that the federal government requires state and local governments to comply with. An example of this could be a funded mandate where the government says, here's the money to implement this, but if you don't spend the money, or if you don't change some policy to what we want you to do, you don't get the money. An example of this is the National Transportation Law of 1984 that penalized states whose legal drinking age was lower than age 21. South Dakota challenged this, saying that setting the drinking age is a reserved power of the states. The federal government shouldn't be involved with that. But the court said that the national government could encourage states to set the drinking age at 21 by threatening to cut their highway construction funds. So it was sort of like, yeah, you don't have to do this, but if you do, you're going to lose money. So funded mandates, giving money to the states, often with strings attached. Unfunded mandate is a requirement to the states where there are no funds provided. An example of this is the Americans with Disabilities Act. In this case, or in this act, actually, I'm going to show you that in just a moment, so we'll come to that. Here it is. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against people in employment, transportation, public accommodation, communications, and governmental activities in all circumstances, not just those receiving federal funds. And this was an unfunded mandate, many requirements, including having transportation, like buses provide wheelchair access, certainly buildings having ramps and access for handicapped in the restrooms and parking. So these are things that cost the states money but was not funded by the federal government. The next act I want to talk about is the Welfare Reform Act of 1996. The states were given the power and money to run their own welfare programs, and they were given discretion on how to implement moving people from welfare to work. There was still grant money involved, but in this case, this is a form of devolution, returning the power or the responsibility for implementing programs back to the states. So that's the Welfare Reform Act, and remember that it's giving the states discretion on how to move people from welfare to work. Thanks for listening.